The Duke tore his wife's printing license in half and threw the pieces into a burning brazier. You will never publish another word under my name. Duchess Eleanor Ravenshire did not look at the flames. She looked past her husband toward the soldiers breaking open the doors of Hawthorne Press. Inside, 47 women stood between rows of silent machines, while armed men searched their desks and overturned trays of metal type. Captain Mercer reached for Martha Bell, a compositor whose husband had died at sea. She has done nothing, Eleanor said. She printed treason, the Duke replied. Martha pressed both ink-stained hands against her apron. Your Grace, I printed hymn books yesterday. The Duke's expression did not change. Once, Eleanor had admired the discipline in his face. Now, she understood that discipline could also be cowardice, dressed as control. Lord Alistair Wycliffe stood beside him, watching the seizure with quiet satisfaction. The powerful minister had promised Nathaniel a position in the Privy Council if he closed the press before the parliamentary debate the following morning. In return, Hawthorne Press and its records would pass into Wycliffe's custody. Eleanor stepped between Martha and the captain. If you arrest one of my workers without naming the document she allegedly printed, you will have to arrest me first. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Do not turn this into a performance. You brought soldiers to my workshop at noon. You made it a performance. A few workers lowered their eyes, but Eleanor saw one of them hide a small brass composing stick beneath a bundle of paper. They were frightened, yet they were still thinking. That mattered. Nathaniel held out a folded accusation. This pamphlet calls for the removal of the king's ministers. It was printed with your type, on paper purchased through your accounts. Eleanor opened it. The title read, The King's Enemies Sit Beside His Throne. She turned the page, then another. The text accused 3 ministers of accepting foreign money. Lord Alistair Wycliffe's name was not among them. Where was this found? In a cart belonging to your press. Which cart? Nathaniel hesitated. Wycliffe answered for him. The one stopped near Westminster Bridge at dawn. And who was driving it? The man escaped. Eleanor looked at her husband. So there is no witness who saw one of my workers load it, no driver who can identify who hired him, and no record showing that the cart left this building. The paper is yours, Nathaniel said. The paper was purchased by me. That is not the same thing. She studied the printed lines. The letters were clean, but the spaces between them were uneven. Her father had taught her that every press possessed a rhythm, just as every horse possessed a gait. Hawthorne's machines left a narrow pressure mark along the lower edge of each page. This pamphlet had no such mark. Nathaniel noticed her examining it. You are searching for an excuse. I am searching for the truth you were offered and chose not to examine. Colour rose along his cheekbones. 3 nights earlier, Eleanor had asked him to inspect invoices showing that government paper was being diverted from a royal warehouse. He had refused. Wycliffe had been dining with them, and Nathaniel had accused her of trying to embarrass his guest. Now the same paper had been used to accuse her. Search the records, she said. Compare the impressions. Give me 1 hour. You had 3 days to destroy whatever would condemn you. You know I did not. What passed across his face was worse than disbelief. It was recognition followed by deliberate refusal. Nathaniel knew she would never risk the lives of her workers by printing an unsigned political attack. He also knew Wycliffe's patronage could rescue the Ravenshire estates from debts left by his father. He had been given a choice between the truth and power. He chose power. Remove the presses, he ordered. Seal the accounts and arrest anyone who resists. Martha began to cry. Eleanor caught her hand before the soldiers pulled her away. Do not answer questions without Mr. Finch present, she said. Tell the others the same. Captain Mercer paused. Mr. Finch? My solicitor. Nathaniel stared at her. You prepared for this. I prepared for the possibility that my husband might value an appointment more than his wife's innocence. For the first time, his composure cracked. Before he could answer, a newspaper boy ran through the open gate. His cap was missing, and one sleeve had been torn. My Grace, he shouted. They're posting them everywhere. A soldier caught him by the shoulder, but the boy raised a wet sheet above his head. Nathaniel seized it. The blood drained from his face. Eleanor moved close enough to read the headline. By order of the Crown, Nathaniel Ashcroft, Duke of Ravenshire, to be executed for high treason. Beneath it appeared the date of tomorrow and the hour of 6 in the morning. That is impossible, Nathaniel whispered. There has been no charge, no hearing. Ah, Wycliffe took the notice. His eyes moved rapidly across the page. A childish attempt to frighten you, he said. Clearly your wife's revenge. Eleanor ignored him and touched the corner of the paper. The ink was still slightly tacky. She lifted the sheet toward the light. The royal watermark was genuine. Then she examined the letter R in Ravensshire. A hairline crack divided its lower leg. Her breath stopped. "What is it?" Nathaniel asked. "That letter came from my missing second press." Nathaniel looked toward the workshop. The inventory lists only one machine. "Because the second disappeared 3 nights ago, the same night, I asked you to investigate the stolen government paper." Wycliffe folded the notice before Nathaniel could inspect it more closely. An admission, at last. Her own machinery produced it. The sea. "No," Eleanor said. "That press was dismantled for repair. No single thief could have moved it, rebuilt it, obtained royal paper, and distributed hundreds of notices across London without money, wagons, and protection." The newspaper boy twisted free from the soldier. "There's more, Your Grace. Men are putting them outside Parliament, the courts, and every military barracks. They said anyone who tears one down will be arrested after sunrise." "Who said that?" Eleanor asked. The boy swallowed. "Men, wearing uniforms from the Home Office." Everyone turned toward Wycliffe. For one brief second, his practiced smile vanished. Then, the bells of a nearby church began to strike noon. Wycliffe recovered and ordered Captain Mercer to clear the courtyard. But Eleanor was no longer looking at the execution notice. She was looking at the wagons carrying away her presses under her husband's authority. Closing Hawthorne Press had never been merely about silencing her. Someone had needed Nathaniel's signature to seize her machines legally, scatter her workers, and remove every record that could reveal where the stolen press had gone. Her public disgrace was not the end of the conspiracy. It was the door through which it had entered. The first wagon rolled through the gate with Eleanor's largest press, chained beneath a canvas sheet. She counted the remaining machines, then turned to the women gathered under guard. "Martha, take the names of everyone removed from this building. Sarah, record which soldiers carry each account book. Do not interfere with them. Simply observe." Captain Mercer stepped toward her. "You no longer command this workshop. Then you should have no objection to witnesses." Nathaniel came down the steps, still holding the execution notice. He had folded it twice, but his fingers pressed so hard against the paper that his knuckles had turned white. "You will return to Ravensshire House," he said. "You are not to leave until Wycliffe's investigators question you." Eleanor met his eyes. "Will I be questioned as your wife or imprisoned as your enemy?" "That depends upon what the records reveal." "No, it depends upon whether those records survive after you place them in Lord Alistair Wycliffe's hands." Wycliffe's mouth tightened. The Duchess appears determined to make herself look guilty. Eleanor took one step toward him. "And you appear remarkably calm for a man who has just seen an execution notice printed on stolen royal paper." Before he could answer, a black carriage stopped outside the gate. A thin man in a brown coat emerged, carrying a leather case. Mr. Tobias Finch had served Eleanor's father before becoming solicitor to the trust that financed Hawthorne Press. He walked past the soldiers, as if they were inconvenient furniture. "Your Grace," he said to Eleanor, "I received your message." Nathaniel looked sharply at her. "What message?" "The one I sent after you refused to examine the missing paper invoices." Finch opened his case and removed a sealed document. "Under the marriage settlement executed by the late Mr. Hawthorne, the building and machines are held in trust for the Duchess's separate use. His Grace may suspend operations during a lawful investigation, but he cannot transfer ownership without the consent of both trustees." Wycliffe held out his hand. "Give me that document." Finch did not move. "You are not a trustee, my lord." Nathaniel's humiliation showed in the rigid line of his shoulders. "You allowed me to believe the press belonged to the Ravensshire estate." "I told you it supported the estate," Eleanor replied. "You never asked how. For 6 years, Hawthorne Press had printed schoolbooks, shipping notices, sermons, parliamentary reports, and legal forms. Its profits paid the pensions of Nathaniel's retired servants. They also funded repairs to tenant cottages after the floods and purchased grain during the winter. His steward claimed the estate could afford nothing. Nathaniel had accepted every benefit. He had simply never asked where the money came from. Finch handed him a smaller ledger. "During the last 3 years, The Duchess transferred more than £8,000 from the press into Ravenshire obligations. Nathaniel stared at the figure. That cannot be correct. It is exact. You told me the Eastern farms recovered because rents increased. I told you the accounts had recovered, Eleanor said. You chose to let your steward explain the miracle. Wycliffe closed the ledger before Nathaniel could turn another page. None of this changes the fact that treason was printed with her materials. No, Eleanor said, but it explains why someone needed my records seized before Nathaniel learned how much of his estate depended upon the woman he had publicly condemned. A soldier emerged, carrying a locked iron box. Eleanor recognized it as the wages chest. Set that down, she ordered. Captain Mercer blocked her path. Everything inside is evidence. That contains Saturday's wages. The employees are under investigation. Their children are not. Wycliffe waved toward the wagon. Take it. Eleanor turned to Nathaniel. If that chest leaves, 47 families go without food, while your new patron decides whether their mothers are traitors. Nathaniel looked at the wagon, then at Wycliffe. For a moment, Eleanor saw the man she had married, the man who once dismissed a steward for withholding a groom's wages after an injury. Then Wycliffe spoke quietly. The Privy Council appointment will be announced tomorrow, Ravenshire. The king expects resolve. Nathaniel's expression hardened again. Take the chest. Something inside Eleanor went still. Not broken, finished. She removed her wedding ring and placed it on top of the iron box. Nathaniel flinched. What are you doing? Marking the moment you chose. This is not a separation. No, it is a boundary. She turned to Finch. Release the emergency fund. Finch nodded. All of it? All of it. Pay every worker for 4 weeks. Arrange counsel for those arrested. Move their families to the rooms above St. Anne's bindery. Wycliffe laughed once. The bindery has been closed for years. Eleanor looked at him. That is what you were meant to believe. Her father had purchased St. Anne's through a second trust after a warehouse fire destroyed half their business. Eleanor had kept it ready as a refuge for workers and records. It contained no major press, but its rooms were dry, its doors were strong, and it stood outside Nathaniel's control. Nathaniel stared at her, as if seeing a stranger. You built another establishment without telling me. I preserved one place you could not gamble away. His face tightened with wounded pride. Eleanor almost pitied him. Then she heard Martha comforting a young apprentice whose mother had just been taken into custody. The pity vanished. Finch lowered his voice. There is another matter. Your note asked me to check the government paper invoices. And? The warehouse clerk who signed them disappeared yesterday. His room was searched before I arrived. Did he leave anything? Finch drew a narrow strip of paper from his case. Only this. It was hidden inside the spine of a prayer book. Eleanor examined the strip. It held 6 numbers, followed by 3 initials. H. P. Nathaniel moved closer. Hawthorne Press. That is what someone wants us to think. She read the numbers again. They resembled delivery quantities, but every figure was too large for a single printing order. Then she noticed the tiny marks beneath them. Not quantities, street districts. The 6 numbers identified the exact areas where the execution notices had appeared that morning. The letters at the end were not her company's initials. They were an instruction used by government distributors. Hold pending release. The notices had been prepared but were not supposed to be distributed yet. Eleanor looked toward the city, where church bells were carrying the hour across London. The official accusation claimed that her workers had printed and circulated the execution notice before dawn, but Wycliffe's soldiers had occupied every entrance to Hawthorne Press since midnight. If his report was true, no one could have taken the notices out. If the notices had left earlier, then someone had known the Duke's supposed execution date before Nathaniel signed the order closing her press. Either way, the government's own timeline proved that the crime had begun before Eleanor was accused, and Lord Alistair Wycliffe had brought the soldiers precisely in time to hide it. Lord Alistair Wycliffe had brought the soldiers precisely in time to hide it. Eleanor folded the numbered strip and slipped it into Finch's leather case. Take that to St. Anne's, she said. Make 2 copies by hand. Seal, each with different witnesses. Wycliffe stepped forward. That paper belongs to the investigation. It was found by my solicitor in a private room, not inside Hawthorne Press. It concerns treason. So does the notice announcing my husband's execution. Yet you folded that one before he could examine it. Nathaniel looked at Wycliffe. Give it back to me. My grace, we should not contaminate evidence by passing it between untrained hands. It bears my name, and that is precisely why emotion may cloud your judgment. The insult was carefully disguised as concern. Eleanor saw Nathaniel recognize it. His fingers curled at his side, but the promise of political power remained stronger than his pride. Let Wycliffe keep it, he said at last. Eleanor felt no surprise, only confirmation. Wycliffe signalled to Captain Mercer. Take the Duchess to Ravenshire House. Confine her to her rooms until the examination. You have no authority to confine me, Eleanor said. Nathaniel's silence supplied what Wycliffe lacked. Eleanor turned to her husband. Say it yourself. His eyes hardened. You will remain at home until I decide otherwise. Finch began to object, but Eleanor stopped him with a glance. Nathaniel needed to hear his own words without allowing another man to carry the blame. She stepped into the carriage voluntarily. As it pulled away, she saw Lord Alistair Wycliffe enter Hawthorne Press, using the key Nathaniel had just placed in his hand. The betrayal was no longer merely public. Her husband had given another man legal access to her life's work. At Ravenshire House, 2 guards took positions outside Eleanor's drawing room. Her maid, Clara, was permitted to bring tea, but forbidden to carry letters. Eleanor waited until the door closed. Did they search you? Twice. Did you visit St. Anne's this morning? Clara reached into the loose hem of her skirt and removed a brass composing stick. Martha gave me this before the soldiers took her. Inside it were 7 pieces of metal type, arranged in no apparent order. Eleanor tipped them onto the table. D-O-V-E, re, tway. Dover, Clara whispered. And 42. What does it mean? I do not know yet. One piece of type was darker than the others. Eleanor rubbed it with a linen napkin. A faint purple stain appeared on the cloth. The metal letter carried a dark government ink that Hawthorne Press had never been licensed to purchase. Eleanor did not need to identify its formula. The delivery receipt already showed where the barrels had been sent. Warehouse 42. Eleanor's father had helped develop that ink years earlier because ordinary black could be altered with acid. Official documents printed in purple left a brown trace when tampered with. She placed the stained type inside an empty tea tin. Take this to Finch when you are dismissed tonight. Clara's face tightened. What if they do not dismiss me? No, then hide it where they will not burn it. Before Clara could answer, the door opened. Nathaniel entered alone. He looked older than he had 2 hours earlier. Someone had torn another execution notice from a wall and thrown it into his carriage. A smear of black ink marked the cuff of his coat. You instructed your workers to hide evidence, he said. I instructed them to preserve it. Mercer found an empty type case behind the second press. The press that disappeared? The inventory claims it was dismantled. It was. Then why was its type case empty? Eleanor studied him. Because whoever stole the machine also took the letters needed to operate it. His gaze dropped to the table. She had returned the ordinary type to the composing stick, but the purple-stained piece was already inside the tea tin. Was anything else missing? She asked. 3 reams of paper and 2 barrels of ink. Which ink? He hesitated. Purple. There it was, the contradiction he could no longer pretend not to see. My workshop was never licensed to hold Home Office ink, Eleanor said. If your men found empty barrels there, someone placed them after the seizure began. You cannot prove when they arrived. Ask the workers whether they saw them before today. They are your employees. Ask the delivery clerk. He has disappeared. Ask the gatekeeper. Wycliffe dismissed him this morning. Eleanor stood. With the authority you gave him. Nathaniel turned toward the window. Below, men were tearing execution notices from the iron railings, while new ones appeared farther down the street. When did you learn the second press was missing? He asked. 3 nights ago. Why did you not tell me immediately? I came to your study with the repair ledger. Wycliffe was there. A memory moved across Nathaniel's face. Eleanor had stood outside his study holding the ledger while Wycliffe poured brandy. Nathaniel had told her that political matters were no concern of hers and shut the door. You said it was a dispute over invoices, he replied. I said someone had diverted government paper and removed part of my press. You did not say my life was in danger, because the execution notice did not exist yet. Nathaniel's shoulders stiffened. or because you wanted me frightened enough to regret closing the workshop. The accusation landed harder than Eleanor expected. For 6 years, she had paid his inherited debts without humiliating him. She had kept his tenants housed, his servants pensioned, and his family name solvent while allowing society to believe he had accomplished it alone. Now he imagined that she would manufacture his death sentence to win an argument. She opened the drawing room door. The guards looked in. "If that is what you believe of me, leave. This is my house, and this is the room in which you have imprisoned me. Even prisoners may ask their accusers to stop pretending concern." Nathaniel remained motionless. Then voices rose in the hall. Lord Alistair Wycliffe entered with Captain Mercer and a woman Eleanor had never seen. The stranger wore the plain grey dress of a government clerk and carried Eleanor's master account book against her chest. "This is Miss Agnes Crowell," Wycliffe announced. "She will assume control of Hawthorne Press during the investigation." Eleanor's gaze settled on the woman's right hand. Purple ink stained the side of her smallest finger. Miss Crowell noticed Eleanor looking and quickly closed her fist. Wycliffe placed a document before Nathaniel. "Sign this, and she may begin printing official corrections tonight. We must reassure the city before panic spreads." The document transferred operational authority over Hawthorne Press, its remaining equipment, its employees, and all stored materials to Wycliffe's office. Nathaniel picked up the pen. Eleanor looked directly at Miss Crowell. "If you intend to operate my press, you should first explain why Home Office ink is already on your hand." Silence filled the room. Nathaniel stopped before his pen touched the paper. Miss Crowell's face lost its colour. Wycliffe looked at Eleanor without blinking, and in that instant she saw the calculation behind his eyes change. Until now, he had regarded her as a wife who needed to be silenced. Now he understood she was the only person in London who could identify exactly how his conspiracy had been printed. Wycliffe's gaze moved from Eleanor to the purple stain on Miss Crowell's hand. "She is a Home Office clerk," he said. "Of course, she has handled government ink." "Then she should know it cannot be removed with ordinary soap," Eleanor replied. "Show us your other hand, Miss Crowell." The woman kept both fists closed. Nathaniel lowered the pen. "Do as she asks." Miss Crowell looked toward Wycliffe. That single glance answered more than any confession could have. Captain Mercer stepped closer, but Wycliffe raised one hand. "This spectacle has gone far enough." Miss Crowell spent the morning examining seized ink barrels. "The stain proves she performed her duty." "Then she can tell us which barrel leaked," Eleanor said. Miss Crowell swallowed. "The second." Both barrels were empty. The clerk's lips parted. Nathaniel turned sharply toward Wycliffe. "You told me they had been found empty." "A careless choice of words," Wycliffe said. "One may have contained residue." Eleanor picked up the transfer document. Its first page granted Miss Crowell control of the workshop. The second authorized her to print emergency government notices without the approval normally required from 2 senior clerks. Wycliffe reached for it. Eleanor stepped back. "Why does she need permission to print without witnesses?" "London is filling with forged execution orders," he replied. "Delay invites panic. No, secrecy invites forgery." She placed the document before Nathaniel and pointed to the final clause. "If you sign this, Miss Crowell may use my machines, royal paper, and Home Office ink, while every person capable of identifying her work remains under arrest." Nathaniel read the clause twice. For one fragile moment, Eleanor thought he might finally refuse. Then bells began ringing in the street, not church bells this time, but the handbells used by newspaper sellers. A boy's voice rose outside. "Royal coup discovered. Duke of Ravenshire commands the army." Nathaniel crossed the room and pulled aside the curtain. People were gathering before the house. Several held a new broadside printed in purple ink. At its centre appeared an order directing 2 army regiments to surround Parliament before sunrise. The order bore Nathaniel's signature. "That is not mine," he said. A stone struck the window. Clara cried out as the glass shattered. Eleanor pulled her away before a second stone came through. It hit the tea table, overturning the tin that contained the stained letter. The piece of type rolled across the carpet. Miss Crowell lunged for it. Eleanor reached it first. Captain Mercer drew his sword as shouting erupted below. "My Grace, we must move you away from the windows." "Not until I know what that is," Nathaniel said. Eleanor held up the metal letter. "It came from the composing stick Martha hid before her arrest. It carries Home Office ink. and may belong to the stolen press. Wycliffe's face remained calm, but Miss Crowle looked terrified. Another stone broke the upper pane. The guards pushed into the room. Nathaniel pointed toward Eleanor. "Take the Duchess to the rear apartments." "No," she said. "If the crowd enters this house, the servants will be trapped between the front staircase and the locked courtyard. This is not the time to debate architecture. I am not debating. I am preventing deaths." Eleanor opened the cabinet beneath the writing desk and removed a ring of household keys. For 4 years, she had organized fire drills after discovering that the previous housekeeper locked service doors at night. She handed one key to Clara. "Open the passage to the stable yard. Take the kitchen staff and junior maids through first." She gave another to Captain Mercer. "The west gallery leads to the neighbour's embassy. Place 6 men at the iron door, but do not open it unless the front entrance falls." Mercer hesitated. Nathaniel said, "Do it." Within minutes, servants moved away from the vulnerable hall. Eleanor ordered heavy furniture placed behind the front doors, while leaving a narrow route for the guards to retreat. Wycliffe watched her take command of the household he had expected to see descend into panic. Then, the front doors shook under the force of the crowd. "Bring me one of the new broadsides," Eleanor told Mercer. A guard returned carrying a crumpled purple sheet. Eleanor placed it beside the black execution notice. The forged military order had been printed hastily. Several letters sat too high, and the bottom line leaned downward. She did not need to identify every flaw. She needed to stop the riot. "Finch keeps a portable hand press in his carriage," she said. "Captain, send 2 men to retrieve it." Wycliffe blocked the door. "She is forbidden to publish." "If the crowd believes Nathaniel ordered troops against Parliament, we need a denial bearing his real signature. I will issue one through the Home Office. By the time your office approves it, these doors will be gone." Nathaniel looked at the crowd below. "What do you need?" "One sheet written in your own hand, witnessed by Mercer and Finch. I will reproduce it exactly. No political argument, no accusation against anyone, only a denial and a promise to appear before Parliament tomorrow." Wycliffe's voice sharpened. "You cannot promise that." Nathaniel turned on him. "Why not?" "Because your appointment must be announced first. My house is under attack because someone printed an order in my name, and appearing before Parliament without preparation may destroy your career." Eleanor stared at her husband. "There is the choice again. Your people or your position." Nathaniel took a clean sheet and wrote the denial. Finch's handpress was carried into the dining room. Eleanor inked the plate herself while Clara cut paper. Nathaniel signed the first 20 sheets. Mercer witnessed them, and the guards passed them through the upper windows to the crowd. The shouting weakened. When Nathaniel appeared on the balcony holding the original, the street finally fell quiet. Wycliffe joined him before the people could disperse. "His Grace has acted swiftly," he announced. "Under my direction, an official correction has been produced to expose the Duchess's dangerous forgeries." Eleanor heard the words from inside. Nathaniel heard them too. He looked back at her through the broken window. He could have corrected Wycliffe with a single sentence. He said nothing. Miss Crowle used the distraction to edge toward the fireplace. The stained metal letter was still on the table beside Eleanor, but the woman was not looking at the type. She was looking at the tea tin. Eleanor followed her gaze and saw a thin scrap of paper trapped beneath its overturned lid. Clara must have hidden it there with the type. Eleanor pulled it free. It was a delivery receipt for the missing purple ink, signed 2 nights earlier by Agnes Crowle. At the bottom, in a different hand, someone had written, "Deliver to Dover Warehouse 42 before the Duke signs." Eleanor handed the receipt to Nathaniel. "Here is your chance," she said. "Send Mercer to Warehouse 42 before Wycliffe can remove what remains there." Nathaniel read the instruction. Outside, Wycliffe was promising the crowd that the Duchess would soon be formally charged. Nathaniel needed only to issue one order to test which of them was lying, and Lord Alistair Wycliffe had not yet realised that the proof was already in his hand. Nathaniel read the instruction again. "Where did you get this?" Clara concealed it with the metal type. He turned toward her maid. Clara stood beside the broken window, blood running from a small cut on her cheek. "Martha found it beneath the packing table before she was arrested," she said. "She feared Lord Alistair Wycliffe's men would destroy it." The drawing-room doors opened. Wycliffe entered, followed by Miss Crowle and 2 Home Office officers. His public smile disappeared when he saw the receipt in Nathaniel's hand. "What has she given you now?" "A delivery order, signed by Miss Crowell." Wycliffe glanced at the document. "An obvious forgery." Miss Crowell found her voice. "I have never seen it before." Eleanor pointed toward the signature. "Ask her to write her name." Wycliffe laughed. "You propose comparing two signatures as if a traitor could not imitate one." "No. I propose sending Captain Mercer to Warehouse 42. Mercer stepped forward. "I can have 6 men there within half an hour." "No," Wycliffe said. The captain looked at him. Wycliffe lowered his voice. "That warehouse stores confidential government materials. A military intrusion could compromise operations vital to the Crown." "Then send one magistrate with Finch," Eleanor replied. "Your solicitor has no authority in a government facility." "Send Nathaniel." Wycliffe's eyes sharpened. "The Duke cannot wander through London while forged orders call for rebellion in his name." Eleanor faced her husband. "Then let Mercer go." Nathaniel looked from the receipt to Wycliffe. "Is Warehouse 42 under your control?" "It is used by several officers." "That was not my question." Wycliffe paused. "Yes." A second contradiction stood plainly between them. Nathaniel had been told the missing press belonged to Eleanor, the purple ink belonged to the Home Office, and the forged notices had been distributed through 6 districts. Now, a receipt connected all 3 to a warehouse controlled by the man, demanding authority over her business. Eleanor watched, understanding, reach her husband. Then fear followed it. If Wycliffe was guilty, Nathaniel had trusted a conspirator. He had allowed that man to seize his wife's property, arrest innocent workers, and announce her guilt before London. Accepting the truth would not merely cost him an appointment. It would expose his judgment as the weapon used against them both. Wycliffe moved closer. "Ravenshire, you are being manipulated by a woman desperate to preserve her enterprise. She knew you intended to close the press. She prepared this performance in advance." "He knew about the missing government paper before today," Eleanor said. "I told him 3 nights ago." Wycliffe turned to Nathaniel. "Did she show you proof?" Nathaniel did not answer. "Did she name a warehouse?" "No." "Did she mention an execution notice?" "No." "Then she gave you just enough warning to protect herself later." Eleanor felt the trap close, not because Wycliffe's argument was convincing, but because it offered Nathaniel the one thing he wanted most: innocence without responsibility. "If you believe him," she said, "send Mercer anyway. If the warehouse is empty, you lose nothing." Wycliffe's hand settled on the transfer document. "You lose time. Before nightfall, copies of the forged military order may reach the northern regiments. We must regain control of Hawthorne Press immediately and issue authenticated commands." "With the same machinery used to forge the first ones?" Eleanor asked. "With government supervision." His supervision. Nathaniel walked to the writing desk. The transfer document waited beside the unsigned accusation against Eleanor. 2 signatures would give Wycliffe everything he required: control of her presses and lawful authority to detain anyone who challenged their use. Eleanor stepped between him and the desk. "Look at me." He did. "You know I did not print your execution notice." His expression shifted, but he remained silent. "You know I did not order troops against Parliament. I know you have hidden property, money, and another workshop from me. To protect the people, you repeatedly refused to protect. You made me appear a fool in my own house." "No, Nathaniel, Wycliffe did that. I merely refused to pretend otherwise." His pride rose where reason had almost taken hold. "Stand aside. If you sign those papers, you are not investigating me. You are handing my voice, my workers, and the means of proving the truth to the man named by the evidence. The evidence you produced. The evidence you are afraid to test." His face closed. Nathaniel took her by the arm and moved her aside. It was not violent, but it was final. He signed the transfer of Hawthorne Press to Lord Alistair Wycliffe. Then he signed the formal accusation declaring that Eleanor had used her business to manufacture seditious material and threaten the security of the Crown. Captain Mercer stared at the papers. "My Grace, perhaps the warehouse should still be examined." "You have your orders," Nathaniel said. "Do I?" Wycliffe picked up the transfer. "You will escort the Duchess to the Home Office holding rooms." Mercer looked at Nathaniel, waiting for him to contradict the command. Nathaniel folded the delivery receipt and placed it inside Wycliffe's file. "Do as he says." Clara began to cry. Finch stepped forward. Her Grace is entitled to counsel and a named charge before detention. She has a named charge, Wycliffe replied. High treason. The guards approached Eleanor. Martha, the other workers, and now Clara had risked themselves to preserve evidence. Nathaniel had been given the chance to verify it and had instead delivered it to the suspect. Eleanor no longer wanted to save her marriage. She wanted to save the women whose loyalty had placed them in danger and prevent her husband's authority from being used to tear the country apart. She removed the household keys from her waist and placed them in Clara's hands. Go to St. Anne's. Tell them not to wait for me. Nathaniel looked at her. What does that mean? It means you are no longer the person I am trying to bring home. Captain Mercer escorted her into the hall. As they descended the staircase, the city bells began ringing again. A messenger rushed through the front doors carrying a sealed military dispatch. He handed it to Wycliffe, who broke the seal and read it without allowing Nathaniel to see. But Eleanor saw Miss Crowle smile. What has happened? Nathaniel demanded. Wycliffe folded the dispatch. The 1st Regiment has acknowledged your command. They will enter London before dawn. Nathaniel went pale. I issued no command. No, Eleanor said, as the guards took her away. But you just gave your press to the men who did. Outside, the 1st Government wagons were already turning toward Hawthorne Press. They were not carrying paper for a correction. They were carrying enough purple ink to print orders for an army. The Home Office carriage had travelled only 3 streets when the sound of marching boots reached Eleanor through its shuttered windows. Captain Mercer lifted the leather curtain. A column of soldiers moved toward Westminster beneath the yellow lamps. Their muskets rested against their shoulders, and their officers carried purple orders bearing Nathaniel's forged signature. How many? Eleanor asked. Nearly 400 in this column. And the 2nd Regiment? Approaching from the north. The officer seated opposite her struck the carriage roof. Keep moving. Mercer let the curtain fall. If both regiments reach Parliament, the guards may fire before anyone learns the orders are false. Then stop them. I command household guards, not royal troops. You carry the Duke's genuine denial witnessed by 2 men. I carried it. Lord Alistair Wycliffe ordered every copy surrendered before we left Ravensshire House. Eleanor looked toward the Home Office officer. His hand rested upon his coat pocket. The original is there, isn't it? The officer said nothing. Mercer's face changed. He reached across the carriage. The man drew a pistol. Eleanor struck his wrist with both hands. The shot tore through the roof, and horses screamed outside. Mercer drove his shoulder into the officer and pinned him against the door. The carriage swerved onto the pavement. Eleanor found the original denial inside the officer's coat. Beneath it lay a 2nd document bearing Nathaniel's signature. It authorized Wycliffe to issue military instructions in the Duke's name during the emergency. Nathaniel had not only surrendered the press, he had surrendered his voice. The carriage overturned. Wood splintered. Eleanor struck the wall, and pain shot through her shoulder. Mercer kicked open the upper door and pulled her into the street as the driver tried to calm the horses. The Home Office officer crawled through the broken frame. Arrest them. Mercer drew his sword. No one is arresting the Duchess until this order reaches the regiment. Eleanor pressed one hand against her shoulder. The soldiers will not trust a handwritten denial after receiving printed commands with official seals. Then what will they trust? Their own distribution rules. She took out the strip marked with the 6 districts. Every official military order was released through assigned stations. Each station kept one receiving sheet, signed by the courier and the duty officer. Wycliffe could forge an order and a seal, but he could not easily replace records held inside separate barracks. Take me to the nearest distribution station, she said. The Home Office officer raised his pistol again. Mercer struck him across the forearm. The weapon fell, and 2 household guards dragged him away from the carriage. You are now resisting an officer of the Crown, Eleanor warned. I am resisting a man who fired at an unarmed prisoner. Mercer helped her into the saddle of a guard's horse. Where? Whitehall Station 3. The station doors were locked when they arrived. Mercer hammered on them with the hilt of his sword. A frightened clerk opened a narrow viewing panel. Stand back. We have orders to admit no one. From whom? Eleanor called. The Duke of Ravensshire. I am his wife. Open the receiving ledger to tonight's military command. I cannot. Then hold it to the panel. The clerk hesitated. Marching drums sounded closer. Eleanor forced herself to breathe through the pain in her shoulder. If those soldiers reach Parliament and fire on royal guards, every man in that column may be hanged for obeying a forged command. You can protect them by showing me one page. The ledger appeared behind the panel. The entry for the command had no courier's signature. In its place was a printed name. Eleanor nearly laughed despite the danger. Official orders were printed. Receipts were not. A courier had to sign by hand after delivery so that another man could testify to seeing him. Wycliffe's conspirators had reproduced the form but misunderstood its purpose. "This order never passed through your station," she said. The clerk's eyes widened. "I found it on my desk after the midnight watch changed." "Who relieved the watch?" "Home Office men." Mercer showed him Nathaniel's handwritten denial. "You witnessed the false entry," Eleanor said. "Will you swear to it before the regiment's colonel?" The clerk looked toward the approaching drums. "If I refuse, then Wycliffe will blame you when blood is spilled." The door opened. The young station clerk's hand shook as he carried the ledger into the street, but he came willingly. They reached the head of the military column, 1 block from Parliament. The colonel refused to halt. "I have written authority from the Duke of Ravenshire, acting under the Crown." "You have a forgery," Eleanor shouted above the drums. He raised his hand, and 2 soldiers lowered their bayonets toward her. Mercer displayed the denial. The colonel glanced at it. A frightened man can deny his command after issuing it. The station clerk held up the receiving ledger. "This order did not pass through an authorized station, Colonel. There is no courier's signature. Perhaps the courier neglected it." "He could not have," Eleanor said. "The name was printed before the sheet arrived." The colonel looked more closely. Behind him, hundreds of soldiers waited. "Why should I trust a woman charged with treason?" "You should not trust me. Trust your own regulations. Send an officer to any other station listed on the command. If one ledger contains a genuine signature, continue marching." That stopped him. He dispatched 2 riders. Until they returned, the regiment remained in the street. Eleanor could have used the delay to flee. Instead, she stayed beside the station clerk, knowing Wycliffe would destroy the young clerk if he stood alone. Half an hour later, the riders returned. Every ledger contained the same printed signature. The colonel ordered his men back to their barracks. A relieved sound moved through the ranks. Then hoofbeats approached from Westminster. A royal messenger carried a warrant bearing the king's seal. "For Nathaniel Ashcroft, Duke of Ravenshire," he announced. "He is to be arrested for issuing unlawful commands to His Majesty's soldiers." Eleanor closed her eyes. Nathaniel had lost the political position for which he had betrayed her. He had also lost his liberty, his authority, and perhaps his title, not because she failed to save him, but because he had signed away his voice to Wycliffe. Mercer looked at her. "If we bring the denial to the palace, it may delay his arrest." "No." He appeared startled. "Your Grace?" "The denial proves he did not sign the first military order. It does not erase the document giving Wycliffe power to issue later commands in his name. He may be executed. I will prevent an innocent man from being condemned for forgery. I will not hide the choice that enabled it." The royal messenger handed Mercer another paper. "Wycliffe has convened an emergency hearing at 6 tomorrow morning. The Duchess will be presented as the architect of the conspiracy. The Duke has agreed to testify against her in exchange for the Crown's consideration." Mercer read the final line and went still. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. He handed her the notice. All 47 Hawthorne workers had been transferred from ordinary custody to cells beneath Westminster. At 6 in the morning, Wycliffe intended to present their statements as proof that Eleanor had directed the plot. There were only 7 hours left, and beside each woman's name was a black mark, meaning she had already confessed. Eleanor examined the black marks beside the women's names. "They have not confessed." Mercer looked at her. "The document says they have. The marks say their statements were completed. They do not prove the women signed them." She touched the paper. Each mark was identical in shape and pressure. They were printed. The young station clerk leaned closer. Why would anyone print a mark instead of making it by hand? To prepare 47 confessions before questioning 47 prisoners. Eleanor turned the sheet over. Purple ink had bled through the paper beneath each black mark, creating faint brown shadows. Wycliffe's office had printed the forms in purple, altered them with acid, then covered the damaged areas with black symbols. The method her father designed to reveal tampering had been used to conceal it. Yet the chemical reaction had betrayed them. "If we can obtain one original confession," she said, "we can prove the words were printed before the women were arrested." "The prisoners are beneath Westminster," Mercer replied. "We cannot enter without a warrant." "We will not begin there. Take me to St. Anne's." The old bindery stood behind a shuttered bookseller's shop near Fleet Street. When Clara opened the concealed door, Eleanor found 23 workers waiting inside. Some had escaped arrest. Others were wives, daughters, and sisters of those detained. No one asked why the Duke was not with her. Martha's daughter, Lucy, ran forward. "Will they hang my mother?" Eleanor knelt, despite the pain in her shoulder. No one will face that hearing alone. It was not a promise of safety. Eleanor would not lie to a frightened child. But it was a promise of presence, and Lucy held on to it. Finch transformed the bindery's cutting table into a legal desk, and the station clerk wrote a sworn account of the false receiving ledger. Mercer sealed the original denial inside a metal dispatch case and signed across the lock. Eleanor placed the stained piece of type, the numbered district strip, and the list of workers beside one another. "Dover 42 is not only a warehouse address," she said. Finch looked up. "What else?" "My father numbered replacement parts by destination and machine. The first word named the town where the press was manufactured. The number identified its production record." She turned the metal letter over. A tiny triangle had been cut into its base. Hawthorne's second press was built in Dover. Record 42 would list every replacement letter cast for it, including this damaged R. "Where is the record?" Mercer asked. "At the Foundry Archive." "How soon can we reach Dover?" "We cannot, but the London Printers Guild keeps certified copies for insurance claims." Finch checked the clock. "The Guildhall opens at 8. The hearing begins at 6, Clara said. "Then we wake the archivist." Finch unlocked the Printers Guild archive with the authority of Hawthorne Press's legal trustee. Years earlier, he had filed the insurance record for the missing machine himself. He opened the chained ledger to Dover Press 42. Beside its registration number was a sketch of the cracked R, the same flaw appearing on the execution notice. "This record was certified before your marriage," Finch said. "Neither Wycliffe nor anyone in the Home Office could have added it tonight." Mercer witnessed the page, recorded the time, and sealed a certified copy inside the evidence box. For the first time that night, Eleanor held proof that did not depend solely upon her word. The forged execution notice had been printed with the stolen Hawthorne press. The purple stain connected its type to Wycliffe's office. The false distribution ledgers connected Wycliffe's men to the military orders. But they still needed someone who could prove who moved the machine. A knock sounded at the guild door. Mercer drew his sword. "It is I," Nathaniel called from outside. Eleanor did not move. Finch opened the viewing panel. Nathaniel stood between two royal guards. He was no longer wearing the jewelled insignia of his rank. The king's warrant had stripped him of his seat in the Privy Council before he had even taken it. "I have been permitted 10 minutes with my wife," he said. Eleanor answered from across the room. "You have 8. When the guards admitted him, Nathaniel saw the workers' families sleeping between bundles of paper. He saw Finch distributing emergency wages from Eleanor's fund. He saw Lucy Bell curled beneath Eleanor's coat. "What is this place?" he asked. "The refuge I built after you dismissed 12 presswomen during the winter shortage. I ordered no such dismissal. Your steward did. You approved his expense reductions without reading the names." Nathaniel looked at the women around him. "How many times did you repair what I failed to notice? This is not the hour for counting." He flinched but nodded. "Wycliffe offered me consideration if I testify that you controlled every decision at Hawthorne Press. And did you accept?" "No." Eleanor waited. "I told the Royal Examiner that I signed the transfer after you showed me evidence connecting Wycliffe to Warehouse 42. The room became silent. That admission would not free Nathaniel. It confirmed that he had knowingly ignored evidence before granting Wycliffe authority. "What did it cost you?" Eleanor asked. "My immunity. The Crown will charge me with criminal negligence if the conspiracy is proved." For the first time, he had surrendered something without demanding that Eleanor reward him. "I also learned why Wycliffe wanted my name," he continued. My title grants ceremonial command over the Ravenshire militia. Orders bearing my seal would make the troop movement appear lawful long enough for his men to seize Parliament's dispatch rooms. And after that? You know, he planned to announce that I led the uprising. My execution notice was prepared as the conclusion. Eleanor's anger did not soften. You are telling me what I already understood. I am telling you that I found the man who moved your press. Mercer stepped closer. Who? Wycliffe's private carter. Wycliffe's private carter. He is being held in the stable yard behind the Home Office. Can he testify? If he survives until morning, Eleanor closed the evidence box. We will bring him before an independent magistrate. Nathaniel reached for the box. She pulled it away. You will not control the evidence. I was trying to help. Then help under my conditions. Mercer keeps the box. Finch records every transfer. You do not speak for me, and you do not ask me to conceal what you signed. Nathaniel lowered his hand. I agree. They left through the rear passage in 2 groups. Eleanor travelled with Mercer and the sealed box. Nathaniel and Finch took another carriage to alert a magistrate. When Eleanor reached the Home Office stable yard, the gate stood open. Wycliffe's private carter's cell was empty. A smear of blood marked the floor, and one broken chain hung from the wall. Mercer checked the yard. He was moved minutes ago. Eleanor opened the dispatch case to compare its seal with the wax on the chain order. The case was empty. The damaged R, the only object tying the stolen press to the forged notices, was gone. Across the courtyard, Miss Crowle climbed into a waiting carriage with the wooden evidence box beneath her arm. Lord Alistair Wycliffe's men had followed them from St. Anne's. And now, the witness and the proof were disappearing together. "Stop that carriage!" Mercer shouted. He ran into the street as the driver whipped the horses forward. Eleanor followed, but pain tore through her injured shoulder and forced her against the gate. Mercer seized the rear rail. A man leaned from the carriage and struck him across the temple with a pistol. He fell beneath the turning wheel and rolled aside just before it crushed his legs. The carriage disappeared toward Westminster. Eleanor reached him. "Can you stand?" "Yes." Blood ran from his hairline, but his eyes remained clear. Behind them, a bell began ringing inside the Home Office. Guards poured into the yard through 3 separate doors. Nathaniel and Finch arrived at the opposite gate with a grey-haired magistrate. Before they could enter, Wycliffe's officers surrounded them. A senior inspector raised a warrant. Duchess Eleanor Ashcroft, you are charged with escaping lawful detention, assaulting a government officer, stealing military records, and conspiring to abduct a Crown witness. The witness was already gone when we arrived, Mercer said. Because she ordered his removal. Eleanor looked at the empty chain, then showed the magistrate the transfer order. The inspector produced a paper bearing her signature. It stated that Wycliffe's private carter was to be moved to St. Anne's bindery for protection. Finch took one glance at it. That signature is false. It matches the orders found at her hidden workshop. Wycliffe had raided St. Anne's while they were at the Guildhall. The refuge, the emergency fund, and every paper stored there would now be presented as parts of her conspiracy. Lucy and the other families had been left behind. Eleanor moved toward the gate. "What have you done with the women inside St. Anne's?" The inspector blocked her. "They are being taken into custody. They include children. They include witnesses." Nathaniel stepped forward. "Those families have no connection to the military orders." The inspector turned toward him. "You no longer possess authority here, Your Grace." The words struck Nathaniel visibly. Only hours earlier, one command from him had closed Hawthorne Press and imprisoned Eleanor. Now the power he had abused had been removed, and he could not protect even the children endangered by his choice. "Release them under my personal guarantee," he said. "Your guarantee has no value." Wycliffe entered the yard behind the guards. He had changed into formal court dress. No ink marked his hands, and no alarm showed in his face. "The emergency hearing has been moved forward," he announced. "It will begin in 1 hour." "It is not yet dawn," Finch said. "The King's ministers cannot wait while the Duchess manufactures new evidence." "You stole the evidence," Mercer said. Wycliffe looked toward the blood on his face. "You attacked Miss Crowle's carriage. Fortunately, she escaped with the government property you attempted to seize." "The box belonged to the Printers' Guild," Eleanor replied. "Then the Guild may petition for its return after the treason inquiry." Nathaniel stepped between them. "I gave you control of the press." Eleanor opposed it. Every military order issued afterward is my responsibility before it is hers. Wycliffe's expression sharpened. Consider what you are saying. I have considered too little until now. The guards and clerks in the courtyard turned toward him. Nathaniel spoke more loudly. My wife showed me a receipt connecting your clerk to Warehouse 42. Captain Mercer offered to search it. I refused because I feared losing the appointment you promised me. Wycliffe's face remained still, but the inspector lowered the warrant slightly. Nathaniel continued. I signed the accusation against Eleanor, despite knowing her press had been stolen. I transferred her machinery to your control after she warned me that doing so would permit further forgeries. If she is to be tried for the consequences, then my decisions must be entered into the same record. It was not an apology. It was more costly than one. He had publicly destroyed the defense Wycliffe had offered him and accepted the possibility of imprisonment without asking Eleanor to save him. Wycliffe stepped close enough that only those in the yard could hear. You have just surrendered your title. No, Nathaniel said. I endangered it when I chose ambition over evidence. Eleanor looked at him. For one dangerous instant, memory showed her the younger man who had once read every page she printed and brought supper to the workshop during winter orders. Then she remembered Martha's arrest, Clara's tears, and the transfer document beneath his hand. Recognition was not repair. Wycliffe still has the witness, she said, and the evidence. The minister smiled. At last, we agree on something. The hearing chamber was already filling when Eleanor arrived under guard. Wycliffe had arranged the room carefully. 47 printed confessions lay on the central table. The forged military orders rested beside Eleanor's account books. The emergency fund from St. Anne's had been labelled money reserved for insurrection. Martha and the other workers stood behind a wooden barrier. Several had bruised faces. Lucy was not among them. Eleanor allowed herself one breath of relief. Then Miss Crowell entered, carrying the evidence box. She placed it on the table and opened it before the examining ministers. The damaged letter was gone. Inside lay a collection of ordinary type taken from Hawthorne Press and a written statement claiming Eleanor had ordered it concealed. Amos Pike was brought forward under guard. Is this the type you identified? Wycliffe asked. The old archivist looked toward Eleanor, then at the soldiers beside him. No, he said. Wycliffe held up another document. Your signed statement says otherwise. Pike's face collapsed. They threatened my granddaughter. A murmur moved through the chamber. Wycliffe immediately raised his voice. The witness now changes his account after communicating privately with the Duchess. His reliability is destroyed. The apparent proof had not simply vanished. Wycliffe had replaced it with evidence designed to make every truthful witness appear corrupted by Eleanor. Nathaniel was seated at the far end between royal guards. He could confess his own failures, but he could not prove hers. Eleanor looked at the forged confessions. All 47 contained the same black mark. All had been printed with the same damaged press. Yet without the missing R or the guild record, she could not authenticate the machine. Her gaze moved to Miss Crowell's hands. The purple stain was gone. Then Eleanor remembered the linen napkin in Ravenshire House. When she rubbed the metal type, the purple ink had transferred onto the cloth. Clara had carried the tea things away before Wycliffe's men entered. The napkin still existed, but a stain alone would not prove who printed the orders. Eleanor looked again at the confessions and finally understood what she had missed. Wycliffe had prepared them before the arrests. He believed the identical black marks concealed the altered purple text beneath them. He did not know the chemical reaction continued after the paper dried. By sunrise, the acid-treated letters beneath every mark would turn brown and become readable again. The words Wycliffe had tried to erase would return during the hearing, but he might destroy the confessions the moment he noticed. Eleanor needed to force him to swear publicly that the papers had never been altered and prevent him from touching them afterward. She leaned toward Finch as a guard passed. Ask for every confession to be sealed beneath glass before testimony begins. On what grounds? Tell them I intend to accuse my own workers of changing their statements. Finch stared at her. That will make them hate you. It will make Wycliffe agree. Across the chamber, the minister arranged the confessions beneath the morning lamps. He believed Eleanor was about to turn against the women who had trusted her. Instead, she was preparing to make him defend the one lie that daylight itself would expose. Finch rose before the First Minister called the hearing to order. The Duchess requests that every confession be placed beneath glass and sealed before testimony begins. Wycliffe looked almost amused. Why? Because she intends to prove that her own workers altered their statements after signing them. Martha gripped the wooden barrier. Several women turned toward Eleanor in disbelief. Eleanor did not meet their eyes. If Wycliffe suspected she was protecting the papers, he would remove them before the light reached them. Miss Crowell leaned toward him and whispered. Wycliffe nodded. I welcome the request. Let no one later claim that these women were denied the opportunity to confess freely. 2 clerks arranged the 47 pages beneath glass. Each frame was sealed with wax, bearing the mark of 3 examining ministers. Captain Mercer recorded which confession entered each frame, while the young station clerk noted the time. Wycliffe could no longer exchange or destroy them without breaking a public seal. Only then did Eleanor look at Martha. Trust me a little longer. The compositor's anger did not disappear, but she gave one restrained nod. The hearing began. Wycliffe addressed the ministers first. He described Eleanor as an ambitious merchant's daughter who had hidden money, property, and machinery from her husband. He displayed the emergency fund from St. Anne's, the forged military orders, and the account books seized from Hawthorne Press. She established a private network beyond her husband's knowledge, he said. She employed vulnerable women whose loyalty could be purchased. When the Duke attempted to close her press, she printed his execution notice, forged military commands in his name, and ordered troops toward Parliament. He placed Nathaniel's accusation on the table. Her own husband recognized the danger. Every face turned toward the Duke. Nathaniel stood between his guards. I recognized only what fear and vanity allowed me to see. Wycliffe's smile tightened. You signed the accusation voluntarily. Yes. You believed your wife capable of treason. I chose to claim that belief because accepting her evidence would have cost me the position you promised. The ministers murmured. Wycliffe raised the transfer document. And you granted my office control of Hawthorne Press so that the government could answer her forgeries. I granted you control after she warned me it would allow the real conspirators to continue printing. Yet you signed. Ah, I did. Nathaniel's admission did not absolve him. It did something more useful. It confirmed that Wycliffe possessed the machines, paper, and authority before the military orders were distributed. Eleanor remained silent until Wycliffe finished. Then she approached the framed confessions. You say these women printed the treasonous documents under my direction. I do. And afterward they confessed? They did. When were their statements completed? Between 3 and 5 yesterday afternoon. Where? In separate rooms beneath Westminster. Were the women allowed to see one another? No. Eleanor pointed toward the black symbols. Then explain why 47 frightened prisoners made precisely the same mark at precisely the same angle. They were instructed where to sign. That is not a signature. It is an official indication that each statement was completed. Made by whom? Wycliffe looked toward Miss Crowell. Government clerks. Before or after the women were questioned? After. Eleanor turned toward the examining ministers. Let that answer be entered exactly. A clerk recorded it. Wycliffe's confidence faltered for the first time. Eleanor moved to the forged military order. This command bears my husband's name, but it was never entered properly at a distribution station. The young station clerk discovered a printed courier's name where a handwritten signature was required. The station clerk was called forward. He testified that the order had appeared on his desk after Home Office men relieved the midnight watch. Mercer then produced copies of the other station ledgers. All carried the same printed name. Wycliffe dismissed the irregularity. The Duchess's accomplices could have altered the ledgers. 6 ledgers in 6 guarded buildings, Eleanor asked. During the same hour I was confined inside Ravenshire House. You controlled others. Then name one person seen entering those stations on my behalf. He could not. Eleanor held up Nathaniel's handwritten denial. This was created at Ravenshire House after the forged military order appeared. Captain Mercer and Mr. Finch witnessed it. Lord Alistair Wycliffe confiscated its printed copies, yet the original was recovered from the coat of an officer ordered to detain me. The officer who had fired inside the carriage was brought forward. Wycliffe expected him to repeat the prepared account. Instead, the man stared at the floor. Who ordered you to take the denial? Eleanor asked. No answer. Who gave you the pistol? He looked toward Miss Crowell. Wycliffe stood. This witness is under suspicion of assault and cannot be trusted. Then why did your office assign him to guard a woman accused of high treason? The ministers exchanged glances. Eleanor returned to the sequence. The execution notice was printed before Nathaniel transferred my workshop. The military order appeared afterward. The only people with continuous access to my missing machine during both periods were those using Warehouse 42. Wycliffe lifted the transfer order. The Duchess authorized the press to be moved. Finch placed the original trust document beside it. No, he said. The press could not be transferred without the approval of both trustees. Neither trustee signed this order. Eleanor did not argue over handwriting. The document mattered for one reason. It had been created inside the office that later received her stolen machine. She called Amos Pike. Wycliffe raised the coerced statement. This witness has contradicted himself. Pike faced the ministers. The box brought here is not the box I sealed. The type inside is ordinary. The letter I identified had a cracked lower leg and a triangle cut into its base. Can you prove such a letter existed? Wycliffe asked. My production record proves it. The record is missing. The original guild ledger is too large to remove from its chained desk. Wycliffe went still. Miss Crowell had stolen the certified copy and the metal letter. She had not known the record copied at the guild hall remained attached to the archive table. 2 royal clerks were dispatched to retrieve the ledger. The windows brightened while they waited. Eleanor lifted the first confession. Martha, what question were you asked before signing this? None. I never saw that paper. Eleanor opened the second statement, then the third. Every confession used the same 37 words, including the same unusual phrase, under the Duchess's direct command. 47 women were questioned separately, Eleanor said, yet everyone supposedly answered in precisely the same words. She faced the Home Office clerk. Who wrote the statements? The clerk looked toward Wycliffe. Answer her, the chief minister ordered. They were delivered to us already printed. When? The clerk's voice dropped. Before the prisoners arrived. Silence spread through the chamber. The confessions had not recorded the investigation. They had been prepared to create its conclusion. Miss Crowell backed toward the door. Mercer blocked her path. The royal clerks returned, carrying the chained guild ledger between them. Amos Pike opened it to the production record for Dover Press 42. There was the damaged R, there was the triangular mark, and beside the original entry was the name of the only government official who had ordered a replacement copy of that exact letter 6 months earlier. The chief minister covered the name with his hand before reading it aloud. The chamber fell silent. Eleanor looked from Miss Crowell to Lord Alistair Wycliffe as the final connection became clear, but the name beneath the minister's palm belonged to neither of them. The chief minister lifted his hand from the guild ledger. Edmund Shaw. Nathaniel rose so abruptly that his guards reached for him. My steward? Eleanor remembered the Eastern farms, the unexplained debts, and the expense reductions that had dismissed 12 presswomen without Nathaniel ever reading their names. Shaw had managed the Ravenshire accounts for 9 years. He knew Nathaniel's seal, his military privileges, and every sum Hawthorne Press transferred into the estate. More importantly, he knew Eleanor had begun tracing the missing government paper. The chamber doors opened. 2 royal officers brought Shaw inside. His coat was torn, and purple ink stained both cuffs. He had been arrested at Warehouse 42 while attempting to burn the remaining military orders. Behind him came Wycliffe's private carter, alive but bleeding from a wound above his ear. The carter looked toward Wycliffe. You promised me passage to France. Wycliffe did not answer. The carter faced the examining ministers. Lord Alistair Wycliffe ordered me to move the Duchess's dismantled press from Hawthorne 3 nights ago. Mr. Shaw gave me the workshop key. Miss Crowell supplied the wagons and government seals. Miss Crowell backed against the wall. He lies. Mercer placed the sealed distribution ledgers beside the guild record. Then explain why your name appears on the receipt for the purple ink. The receipt was forged. And the stain on your hand? Eleanor asked. I handled the barrels during the investigation. There was no investigation when the ink was delivered 2 nights earlier. The clerk looked toward Wycliffe again. This time, he did not look back. Eleanor understood the entire design. Wycliffe had discovered that Nathaniel's debts made him vulnerable to political ambition. He promised to rescue the Ravenshire estate and give the Duke a place in the Privy Council. In exchange, Nathaniel had to silence the wife, whose press records were exposing missing government supplies. Shaw stole the dismantled machine and its type. Miss Crowell diverted royal paper and ink to Warehouse 42. The Carter moved the equipment beneath government seals. They printed Nathaniel's execution notice first, because his death had always been the final act of the conspiracy. Then they used Eleanor's missing press to produce forged military commands bearing the Duke's signature. Nathaniel's ceremonial authority over the Ravenshire militia made the orders believable, long enough to move troops toward Parliament. If the soldiers seized the dispatch rooms, Wycliffe would appear as the minister who defeated the uprising. Nathaniel would be condemned as its leader. Eleanor and her workers would be blamed for printing the orders. Wycliffe would gain power by destroying both husband and wife. "You needed Nathaniel to accuse me publicly," Eleanor said. "Without his signature, taking my press would have been theft. With it, you called the seizure an investigation." Wycliffe finally spoke. "You expect this chamber to believe that one minister arranged an insurrection with a printing machine. No, I expect them to believe the evidence you failed to destroy." The cracked R identified the stolen press. The distribution ledgers proved the military orders had bypassed every lawful station, and Wycliffe's own Carter confirmed who had moved the machine into Warehouse 42. 3 facts. 1. Unbroken chain. Wycliffe had used Nathaniel's authority to seize Eleanor's press, create a false rebellion, and prepare the Duke's execution before the first soldier ever marched. You controlled the paper, ink, clerks, warehouse, and false questioning, but you did not control every witness who touched them. The Carter confirmed the machine's route. The station clerk confirmed the false receiving sheets. Pike authenticated the damaged type. Mercer testified that Wycliffe confiscated Nathaniel's genuine denial. Finch established when ownership of the press was transferred. Martha and the other women showed that their confessions had been prepared before their arrests. No single clue proved everything. Together, they left no place for the conspiracy to hide. Wycliffe looked toward the side door. Royal guards closed around him. Miss Crowell began to speak rapidly. "He designed the plan. I only followed instructions." "Ah, you prepared false confessions for 47 innocent women," Eleanor said. "Do not mistake obedience for innocence." The chief minister ordered Wycliffe, Crowell, and Shaw taken into custody, pending trial for conspiracy against the crown, unlawful military mobilization, forgery, false imprisonment, and destruction of government records. The Carter remained under guard, but would receive consideration for testifying and for leading officers to the hidden press. Then the chief minister faced Nathaniel. "The forged commands were not yours, but your lawful authority enabled those who issued them. You accused your wife after refusing evidence, transferred her property to a suspect, and permitted innocent workers to be detained." Nathaniel bowed his head. "I did." His seat in the Privy Council was permanently withdrawn. His ceremonial militia command was revoked. The Crown placed the Ravenshire estate accounts under external supervision until every payment connected to Shaw could be examined. He kept his title, but not the unquestioned power he had once treated as proof of his judgment. The accusation against Eleanor was struck from the record. Every Hawthorne worker was released before noon. Each received compensation from assets seized from Wycliffe's private fund. The government returned the press, the account books, and the remaining paper to Eleanor's trust. Nathaniel stood before the same chamber in which her guilt had been announced. "My wife warned me that her press had been stolen. She showed me evidence against Lord Alistair Wycliffe. I refused to examine it because the truth threatened my ambition." He did not look away. "I signed a false accusation. I permitted her imprisonment. I gave another man control of what she built and accepted praise for prosperity her work created. No deception by Wycliffe excuses the choices I made." He turned toward the women behind the barrier. "My title made my words dangerous. I used them against innocent people. I will repay every wage lost, every legal expense incurred, and every debt Hawthorne Press paid on behalf of my estate." Then he faced Eleanor. "I will return the authority I took from you. I ask nothing in exchange." That was the first apology she believed. It was not enough to restore the marriage. 3 weeks later, London gathered outside Hawthorne Press for its reopening. Eleanor stood beside Martha before the restored machine. Behind them hung a new charter, granting the workers a permanent share of the press, funded by the money Nathaniel had repaid to the trust. He did not stand beside Eleanor. After surrendering his militia authority, Nathaniel had left Ravenshire House and placed the estate under independent management. He attended the reopening from the opposite side of the street, without title, carriage, or expectation of welcome. Martha noticed him first. "Will you speak to him?" Eleanor looked across the crowd. Nathaniel removed his hat, but did not approach. For once, he allowed the distance between them to be hers, to close or preserve. "Not today," she said. She pulled the lever. The restored press struck its first page. At the top appeared the names of all 47 women Harcourt had tried to silence. Beneath them stood the new words of ownership, printed by the women whose voices could not be seized. Eleanor lifted the page while the workers opened the doors to London. Across the street, Nathaniel bowed once and walked away. She did not follow him. She placed the first page in Martha's hands and began printing the next.